Hey everyone, I'm your host Sam, back with another Shades of Jade weekly rundown. This episode covers July 26th through August 1st, 2026. From the high-stakes interrogation of a former public health titan to the visceral audio of a sitting president's cognitive struggles, the America First movement is now operating in a landscape where secrets are becoming impossible to keep. Today, we're breaking down the Senate showdown with Dr. Anthony Fauci, where the scientist king of the pandemic era invoked the Fifth Amendment over 111 times. We'll analyze his 1,100 pages of private diary entries that show a man obsessed with fame while privately admitting a lab leak was likely as early as January 2020. We are also diving into the Her tapes, the 5 hours of audio that captured Joe Biden's disorientation and memory lapses in a way a transcript never could. We'll look at the invasion of Ceuta, Spain, where 50,000 migrants overran a city in 24 hours, and what that means for the ICE surge in Springfield, Ohio. Finally, we'll cover the military brinkmanship in Iran, the $22 billion renovation of the Dulles Airport, and the Freedom Haulers Initiative for our veterans. Let's dive in. A major focus of the week was the July 29th appearance of Dr. Anthony Fauci before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, chaired by Senator Rand Paul. The hearing addressed COVID-19 origins, pandemic response decisions, and related allegations. Prior to the session, Senator Paul released more than 1,100 pages of Fauci's pandemic-era digital diary entries covering December 2019 to December 2022. Highlighted excerpts included early 2020 notes indicating the initial infections were not connected to the Wuhan market and that the market served as an amplifier rather than the source. For example, this entry from January 26, 2020 read, "It now appears using epidata and genomic data that the first infection was in early December and was not connected to the market. The infection spread among people weeks before the Chinese reported. Now we know the market was not the source, it was the amplifier. Having said that, somewhere the virus jumped from animals to humans." Paul and others argue this shows Fauci privately dismissed the wet market origin early on, while publicly emphasizing natural zoonotic spillover from the market for months. On a conference call with scientists on February 1st, 2020, only 2 of 11 or 12 scientists strongly supported a natural origin. The rest felt deliberate insertion, or lab engineering, was possible. Fauci noted concerns tied to gain-of-function research in Wuhan. These entries fueled accusations that Fauci helped downplay the lab leak hypothesis publicly, while privately acknowledging stronger early evidence for it, or at least greater uncertainty. Multiple entries document Fauci's rising celebrity status, which critics called tone-deaf amid rising deaths. In May 2020, after a flattering Washington Post article, he wrote, "The situation with my national and international fame is explosive and really unimaginable. It is not hyperbole to say that today I am the most famous and talked about person in the country and one of the most recognizable persons in the world." Other notes mention media stories, celebrity encounters, awards, and security details. On March 15, 2020, a big day as described by Fauci, Fauci wrote that he convinced New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and influenced California Governor Gavin Newsom to close schools based on his public statements and conversations. He also referenced closing bars and restaurants. This contrasts with later public statements where Fauci said he didn't recommend or have a major role in prolonged lockdowns or school closures. Perhaps the most personal bombshell came from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who revealed that Fauci's own diary shows he suffered a pulmonary infarction 5 months after his public vaccination, a medical emergency he never disclosed while telling the public there were no adverse events. Other notable entries include frustrations with President Trump and internal administration dynamics, and concerns about investigations tying him to Wuhan research. Critics, including Senator Paul, argue the private notes showed inconsistencies with public messaging on origins and policy. Defenders described the entries as reflecting evolving scientific uncertainty during a novel outbreak and ordinary personal reflections. At the hearing, Fauci delivered an opening statement emphasizing his decades of congressional testimony and cooperation before invoking his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Reports indicated he did so more than 100 times. Some counts placed the number at 111 in response to questions on origins, gain-of-function research, vaccine-related matters, and other topics, including the color of his tie. He stated that, given Senator Paul's public calls for prosecution and the release of the diaries, he believed the hearing's purpose was to elicit statements that could support these efforts. One of his attorneys was ordered to be removed after attempts to interject, and additional lines of questioning addressed emails and staff assistance related to nominations for awards and prizes, including the $1 million Dan David Prize. Fauci declined to answer. No new formal criminal charges were filed during or immediately after the hearing, but Senator Paul announced a committee vote on a contempt resolution for this week, arguing Fauci no longer has Fifth Amendment rights due to his pardon from Biden. Senator Paul also indicated plans to send a referral with supporting legal brief directly to the Department of Justice rather than to the Senate floor. Senators, including Joni Ernst, supported accountability measures, and Florida Attorney General James Oathmeyer launched a state-level investigation, stating the federal pardon did not cover state crimes and that evidence would be sought in coordination with congressional efforts. Subpoenas are expected this week. While Fauci was silent in the Senate, the voices on the Hur tapes spoke volumes. These audio recordings from Special Counsel Robert Hur's 2023 interviews with Joe Biden were leaked and released this week, providing a visceral look at the former president's cognitive state. Listeners can now hear the long pauses, tangential digressions, and Biden's struggle to recall basic facts, such as when his son Beau died or even the years he served as vice president. A simple question about document storage reportedly elicited an 11-minute monologue about home moldings and his Corvette. The tapes also include 2016 conversations with a ghostwriter, where Biden casually mentioned finding classified stuff downstairs, contradicting his later claims of unawareness. These tapes highlight a pattern of sloppy document handling dating back years. Critics argue that the White House's resistance to releasing this audio was a deliberate attempt to hide evidence of a significant decline that affected national security responsibilities. Let's dive a little deeper into this topic. Robert Hur, a former federal prosecutor appointed as special counsel by Attorney General Merrick Garland, investigated Biden's handling of classified documents found at his Delaware home and the Penn Biden Center after he left the vice presidency. Hur's February 2024 report concluded that no criminal charges were warranted, citing insufficient evidence of willful misconduct beyond a reasonable doubt and Biden's cooperation. However, the report drew intense attention for describing Biden as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory, noting struggles recalling details like when his son Beau died back in 2015 or the exact years of his vice presidency. This became politically explosive, especially amid debates about Biden's fitness. The recordings capture roughly 5 hours of interviews over 2 days. They include long pauses, difficulty recalling dates and events, tangential digressions on home renovations, historical topics, or his Corvette, and moments where aides interject to help. Transcripts were released earlier, but the audio with Biden's voice and hesitations made the memory issues more visceral when excerpts surfaced. The Biden administration asserted executive privilege, specifically law enforcement privilege, to block congressional subpoenas from House Republicans seeking the audio. Portions leaked or were obtained by Axios in May 2025, with more full or related recordings, including Biden's earlier interviews with his ghostwriter, Mark Swanitzer, released later through litigation by groups like the Oversight Project and Heritage Foundation. These audio elements reinforced perceptions of cognitive challenges, aligning with Hur's observations and later public discussions. Democrats largely viewed Hur's characterizations as partisan or gratuitous at the time, But the audio later fueled retrospective criticism of how Biden's team handled concerns about his acuity. Her referenced the tapes of Biden speaking with his ghostwriter for the memoir Promise Me, Dad, and these tapes include Biden casually mentioning finding classified stuff and notes from his days as vice president. Republicans pursued the tapes for oversight and impeachment-related probes. The issue highlighted tensions over transparency, executive privilege, and Biden's mental fitness during his presidency, and Hur later defended his report as fair and evidence-based. The ghostwriter tapes from 2016 and 2017 are roughly 70 hours of recordings with transcripts. Key concerning elements include casual or unaware handling of classified and/or sensitive material. Biden referenced or read from notes containing what appeared to be classified information, for example, notes from National Security Council meetings or Afghanistan policy. He told Swanitzer things like, "Some of this may be classified, so be careful. It's not marked classified, but," or, "I just found all the classified stuff downstairs," while discussing a 40-page memo. He also mentioned having extensive notes the White House didn't know about. I want to point out that this indicates memory and recall issues even back then, years before his presidency. Conversations were sometimes painfully slow, with Biden struggling to remember names, dates, or events. This showed patterns predating the 2023 interview. Hur noted Biden's memory was significantly limited in both 2017 and 2023 sessions. Considering broader implications, Swanitzer, lacking security clearance, received this information. He later deleted some recordings, recoverable by investigators, out of hacking fears, raising obstruction questions, though ultimately not pursued. The tape suggested sloppy post office document storage and retention for posterity's sake, contradicting claims of unawareness. Both tapes are concerning overall due to the consistency of cognitive decline, the classified information risks, and the lack of transparency. Critics on one side called the memory focus unfair or partisan, while others saw the tapes as validating long-standing concerns about fitness for office. In the Middle East, the on-again, off-again war with Iran escalated after a surprise ballistic missile attack on U.S. forces in Jordan on July 28th. While the missiles were intercepted, the response was immediate. CENTCOM launched a powerful round of precision strikes against dozens of IRGC command centers, drone sites, and maritime facilities in southern Iran. The U.S. and Saudi aircraft also struck terrorist logistics sites in Iraq in response to over 30 drone attacks in 72 hours. Iran carried out a cyber attack that affected several Minnesota water systems, and President Trump said that Russia was providing Iran with satellite targeting capabilities. Trump warned that if negotiations do not finalize soon, he is prepared to unleash fire and fury, including the total obliteration of the Pickaxe Mountain nuclear facility. However, by August 1st, Trump announced a temporary halt on strikes, citing perimeters of a deal that have been reached at the request of Middle Eastern allies. The deal must include a total opening of the Hormuz Strait and a permanent end to the nuclear threat. In the meantime, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is already seizing Iranian funds to pay for the war damages they've caused. Turning to global stability, we witnessed a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented scale in Ceuta, Spain. Over July 30th and 31st, an estimated 50,000 to 60,000 migrants overran the Spanish enclave from Morocco in just 24 hours. The surge followed a Spanish Supreme Court ruling that limited immediate returns, a loophole exploited by trafficking networks. The city's population effectively increased by 50% in a single day, leading to clashes, home raids, and a state of emergency. Elon Musk described the scenes, composed almost entirely of military-aged males, as a literal invasion. President Trump used this as a stark warning, noting that the same thing could happen to the United States without a major change in leadership. He is already acting. Temporary protected status has officially ended for 350,000 Haitians, and ICE is preparing a surge in enforcement. The city of Springfield, Ohio, which has seen a massive influx of Haitian migrants, is being specifically targeted for arrests and deportations this week. Despite pleas from Governor Mike DeWine to halt the operations, The administration is moving forward, fast-tracking the rejection of fake asylum seekers through USCIS to clear the system. The First Circuit greenlit President Trump's terminating temporary protected status for South Sudan migrants following the Supreme Court's landmark ruling, and Trump launched his Freedom Haulers initiative. This White House program was launched at an event with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, VA Secretary Doug Collins, and trucking leaders. It aims to fast-track military veterans into commercial trucking jobs while enforcing rules against illegal immigrant or non-English proficient drivers. Veterans with a heavy vehicle experience from military service can waive the road and/or skills test for a commercial driver's license, but they do still need to pass the written test. The post-service period for the military skills test waiver extends from 1 year to 2 years, and over 40,000 veterans have already used similar waivers. Support for veterans without experience includes expedited training options, potentially in a few weeks, including during the last 6 months of active duty. The GI Bill covers 100% of CDL training costs and housing allowances in some cases. 34 states are now in the Even Exchange program, and active duty personnel can test in their stationed state. Werner Enterprises pledged to hire 1,400 veterans and military spouses in 2027, a 67% increase for them. The initiative pairs veteran job creation with ongoing enforcement of federal English language proficiency and citizenship and/or immigration rules for commercial drivers, which has led to thousands of license revocations. Trump framed this as improving road safety and prioritizing American veterans. Now it's time for the noteworthy tidbits, which are brought to you today by Big Fork Brands. Let me tell you about them quick. Sometimes I get on a roll cleaning or gardening, and I need a boost, but I don't have time for a meal. Big Fork Brand's pork jerky is the perfect choice to keep my momentum, offering high-protein snacks for on-the-go energy boosts. Not only do they offer pork jerky, but they also make pork sticks, bacon sausage, bacon hot dogs, and burger and hot dog sauces. Products come in a variety of delicious flavors, including Thai green curry and maple and brown sugar for the meat options, and gangster and Chicago fire for the sauces. I personally think the original flavor of the pork jerky hits just right after tackling a big chore. It's a little salty and very flavorful. My discount code gives you 20% off your entire order, and it's currently the best deal available. Just visit bigforkbrands.com and enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. All right, let's get back to the tidbits. Acting Director of National Intelligence Bill Pulte carried out a fourth and fifth round of terminations within the office of the DNI, amounting to an approximately 30% staff reduction from levels weeks earlier. After this fifth round of terminations, Pulte transitioned his office to Jay Clayton, who has now been confirmed as the new Director of National Intelligence. Around 14 to 15 Republican senators have publicly called for canceling or delaying the Senate's August recess until the Save America Act is passed, and President Trump did not rule out ousting John Thune as Senate Majority Leader, refusing to endorse his re-election to the position. The FBI caught a $32 million taxpayer dollar fraudster in Jamaica, their fourth most wanted fraudster in 5 weeks, and they're currently hunting down 7 more. It was confirmed that blue states are spending millions of dollars on discounted tuition for illegal aliens in higher education, with Maryland spending at least $9 million, and Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche confirmed Illinois has been banned from giving discounted in-state tuition to illegal aliens after a federal court found it unconstitutional. Education Secretary Linda McMahon announced moves to defund certain school districts in Maryland, Michigan, and Minnesota after finding that transgender-related policies or activities were implemented without informing the parents. The Democratic National Committee was caught putting its headquarters as collateral for a $15 million loan because they are currently $18 million in debt, and DNC Chair Ken Martin received an HR complaint against him for throwing his phone at a staffer. New York City Mayor Mamdani is accused of fomenting violence against property owners because he published a searchable database of wealthy property owners in New York City, and he's also being sued by an immigrant-led business group because he launched 5 government-funded grocery stores that undercut prices by 30% with taxpayer funds. In other Mamdani news, the families of 9/11 victims have obtained over 50,000 signatures to block him from attending the Ground Zero commemorative event, yet Mamdani insists on going. A statement given by the families reads, "The mayor's failure to meaningfully acknowledge the horror of that day and his association with individuals who have minimized 9/11, defended terrorists, or even suggested America deserves the attacks." War Secretary Pete Hegseth awarded the Mexican Border Defense Medal to service members at the U.S. Pentagon. President Trump visited Michigan to tour the General Motors Proving Ground in Milford and to deliver a campaign-style speech focused on the economy, tariffs, and the auto industry ahead of the state's August 4th primary. Senator Mitch McConnell released another photo and said he is not going back to the Senate floor to vote yet. He's missed 37 Senate votes since his June hospitalization, and we're told he is not yet medically cleared to leave the rehab center and return to his office. The Department of War removed DNI James Clapper's name from the Defense Intelligence Agency facility in D.C. His name was replaced with Thomas Knowlton from the Revolutionary War. On separate occasions, President Trump met with Ukrainian President Zelensky, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang at the White House, as Zelensky and Netanyahu were in town for Senator Graham's funeral. The funeral services were held for the late Senator Lindsey Graham in Washington, D.C., with eulogies by President Trump and others, and the renaming of Joint Base Charleston in his honor. Graham had secured $200 million for that base this year. Lindsey's sister Darlene Graham Nardone launched her campaign to be elected to a full 6-year term as U.S. Senator from South Carolina, taking her brother's seat. The U.S. Senate advanced Russia sanctions legislation by an overwhelming 86-12 vote. The hero 16-year-old lifeguard from a viral video showing his heroic rescue is going to the White House to receive a high civilian honor from President Trump. A $100 billion private investment was announced in Kentucky for AI. Energy Secretary Chris Wright explained the center will be producing more energy than it consumes, and he expects these locations will drive down electricity prices for Americans in the region. Senator Marsha Blackburn filed legislation with Mike Lee and others blocking biological men from joining the Daughters of the American Revolution, which is now letting men who identify as women attend. The DAR was founded by women for women. The U.S. Federal Reserve left interest rates unchanged. The U.S. Senate unanimously passed resolution demanding Ghislaine Maxwell receives no presidential pardon or clemency of any kind for her crimes tied to Jeffrey Epstein and the abuse of minors. This resolution was pushed by Democrat Senator Jackie Rosen of Nevada. President Trump announced a $22 billion renovation plan for the D.C. area's Dulles National Airport, and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy confirmed this renovation will take zero taxpayer dollars. United and other airlines will be pitching in to cover the costs. Senators John Cornyn and Tom Tillis blocked the advancement of Todd Blanche for Attorney General through committee, but President Trump said he will simply keep Blanche on as acting Attorney General, and it's been confirmed he can do so. The Department of Justice busted nearly $400 million in fraud across 7 states involving SNAP, SBA loans, housing benefits, and more, including one scheme that involved food stamps in Florida causing $20 million in losses through EBT. The U.S. Senate advanced 74 Trump appointees in one fell swoop, including 4 U.S. attorneys, 4 U.S. marshals, FEMA, TSA, and other posts. First Lady Melania Trump completed the 5th reunification of Ukrainian and Russian children with their families. She completed the 4th reunification a couple of months ago. U.S. CBP seized $20 million worth of cocaine, with 1,000 pounds hiding in a truck's floorboards and flatbed while en route to Arizona. The Democratic Socialists of America were exposed for taking in mega donor contributions while publicly attacking billionaires and the ultra-wealthy. A sexual harassment investigation was launched into the Democrat mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota, Kaohly Her. She's accused of harassing city employees and police officers. Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. got Gavi to eliminate all mercury from their vaccines that are provided to children. A group of U.S. representatives are asking Secretary of State Marco Rubio and AG Blanche to investigate anti-American influencers like Jackson Hinkle for material support for a foreign terror organization after they attended pro-Khomeini events. In a major announcement, Hamas agreed to disarm under the Board of Peace with Israeli withdrawal and a new Palestinian governing arrangement. Elon Musk is donating $100 million through his America PAC to help Republicans in Iowa, Michigan, Maine, Alaska, and Ohio. He may also donate to help Republicans in Texas, North Carolina, and Georgia. The United States had an 18% drop in murder rate across 2026, on track for the lowest murder rate in over 125 years. President Trump held a cabinet meeting at Camp David, and media coverage and broadcast was allowed. Topics covered included border security, the drop in murder rate, Trump accounts, reductions in prescription drug prices and the Trump RX program, tariffs, foreign investment, and fraud reduction. The Chinese Communist Party flew Democratic Socialists of America members to China as DSA members take a pledge to the CCP. Leftist Judge Allison Burroughs subverted the Supreme Court, blocking President Trump from ending temporary protected status for Somali migrants, and articles of impeachment were filed against her by Representative Andy Ockles for doing so. The FBI's Operation Blackout destroyed 4 of the largest scam compounds worldwide, seizing over $15 billion and saving 10,000 Americans from having their life savings being stolen. Director Patel said thousands of trafficked workers were freed by this. D.C. U.S. Attorney Janine Pirro's office moved to dismiss charges against Hearn, the former Olympian accused of vandalizing the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. Pirro acknowledged her office was given incomplete and/or misleading information by the Interior Department and Park Police, but new evidence showed the widespread damage and peeling were the result of flawed installation by the contractor. That wraps up our recap of July 26th through August 1st. What stood out the most to you this week? Drop your thoughts in the comments or on Instagram or X at Shades of Jade Pod. If these updates are hitting the spot, leave a review and share the show with a friend. Also, hello to my audience in Austria. Until next time, thank you for listening and have a great day.